I'm finally home from the music store with my brand new guitar and my brand new amp. It's time to sit down, plug them in, and enjoy the fact that through this gear, my personal search for happiness is finally complete. Here goes. Hold on. This stuff hasn't made me sound any better, and I don't feel any happier.
Wait, so does gear actually matter? Hello, my name is Colton River and I'm an aspiring musician and music lover. So for the past couple of years I've been chasing this idea of, does the gear that I own make any difference in the music that I make? Now this is a much broader question than I thought originally, so of course I went to YouTube to figure it out. YouTube.com. Surprisingly, at least for my algorithm, there aren't that many videos that actually cover this topic. I watched them all and I made some notes so I could discover the truth that only my custom-tailored YouTube recommendations could provide. The truth if gear actually matters. The first video I watched was the one titled, probably similar to this video's title, was Adam Neely's Does Gear Matter? And in the thumbnail he actually says, kind of, but you shouldn't worry about it, basically. He goes on to talk about the idea of people using high-end gear, people using low-end gear, and he made a lot of good points in the video. But it left me wanting a little bit. There was no real answer. There was just a lot of jumbled answers, and I guess that was kind of the point, was what you decide for yourself. But I'm not looking for subjectivity. I'm not looking for my own personal soul search. I want to know if gear matters. Music is Win is another video I saw. His video was about expensive gear basically, or does gear matter, something like that. And in the beginning he says, gear doesn't matter. And then proceeds to go on and tell you why it does, which left me with a pretty confusing message too. It was like, well, so it does, but it doesn't? I think ultimately what he was saying was, it doesn't really matter, but there are things you can use to improve your situation. But again, I'm not looking for subjectivity. I want to be told what to think and how to feel about things. I mean, for Christ's sake, I spent all this money. Make it good. The next one, Fluff from Riff Beards and Gear, and he straight up said gear doesn't matter. He talked about a point I really liked, actually. He talked about the idea that when he was young and playing in bands, he had just the junkiest gear imaginable, and he was having the most fun doing it. And so he talked about now he has better gear, and it's still fun. And I really like that message. I love the idea of, gear doesn't matter as long as it makes you have fun. That was just a little vlog, and he didn't really get into the meat of why it was fun, or why the more expensive gear was equally fun to the less expensive gear. I mean, we're all out here trying to ask this question. There's a multi-million-dollar industry on gear. Shouldn't there be a better answer? The last music one I watched was Glenn Fricker, and I got through it. There was a lot of yelling, which seemed unnecessary. What Glenn talked about was he watched some local bands somewhat recently and how the first band went on with garbage gear and the second band went on with great gear, and nobody in the audience knew the difference. And basically Glenn's assertion was that the gear doesn't matter so much to the audience, and that's who you're really playing for. And I thought that really provided an interesting perspective as well, kind of an augmentation to Fluff's side. Fluff more the musician side, Fricker's more of the audience side. And so now I think we're getting a little closer to the answer, but there was one more video I watched that I thought was noteworthy. The last one I watched was by a lesser known YouTuber named Perez. Now he's a photography YouTuber. I watch a lot of photography stuff too. While I felt like most of the photography videos I watched weren't really relevant to the musical instrument gear argument or question, some of them had some overlapping areas, and Derek's had a really, really cool story. He talked about this photographer who was working with Kanye West, and so it was like his big break, and he took the best equipment he had, like a red camera and a bunch of like lights, and he did this whole show. And he showed it to Kanye, and Kanye was like, "Nah man, it looks way too clean." So he asked him if he could make it look grainier and more like, you know, authentic and realistic. So the photographer went back and got a garbage lens and a garbage body, and he reshot the show, and Kanye loved it. The point he was trying to make was gear matters, but using the right tool for the right job was also important. Not just buying the $50,000 camera or the $5,000 guitar. That using the right tool makes all the difference in the art. Now, that part also has a really, really good point in conjunction with all the other points I came up with. And so I felt like I was starting to get to an answer to my question. But then I thought, well, what does that have to do with me? So, gear matters, but it also doesn't matter. Well, how am I going to justify buying this guitar and this amp? When I was 18, I ended up graduating high school midterm, and I had about 9 months to burn before college. So I applied for and was accepted for a job at my local newspaper. I very quickly saved up enough money to buy what I thought was a great guitar at the time, which I will contend to this day is still a great guitar, although I might be very biased. I bought a Jackson DKMG dinky style guitar, and I even saved up enough money to put a set of active EMG 81 and 85s in it. I loved this guitar. I loved it from the transparent black finish, which was I think a picture that they put a laminate over, all the way up to the little Floyd Rose top locks that I did not understand and did not use correctly for probably years. I thought this guitar was like the pinnacle of cool, and I played it all the time. Eventually when I was older, I knocked it over, probably while drunk, and it hit the edge of a table and it cracked like real deep down the center of the headstock. I didn't have any money at the time, so I couldn't buy a new guitar or a new neck. I was completely heartbroken. But I wanted to play the guitar so bad. That guitar. Not guitar. That guitar. And I had a friend who was a little more handy than I was, and together with these metal straps he had and these bolts, we literally bolted this thing together. I played that guitar for almost 10 years before that accident happened. And I played it for another 10 years after we fixed it. Without that guitar, I don't even know that I would be the guitar player I am today. In fact, I don't even know if I'd still be playing guitar. It inspired me, it made me want to play guitar every single day. It kept my drive to practice, to get better, and just to play alive for decades, even though it was literally patched together. Now you know from the intro that I have a couple of John Petrucci signature products now. And for me, the idea of John Petrucci signature products is very similar to the idea of that Jackson DKMG. John Petrucci was a huge part of my life. Even though I never met the guy personally, I've never been to a Dream Theater concert, was never really that into Dream Theater. He was always kind of around and always heavily influencing me, which sounds weird to say. I remember being a kid with my guitar before the Jackson. It was an Ibanez G10, I think. It was a garbage guitar. And I really, really wanted to learn how to play. And we didn't have teachers in the rural community where I grew up. So my parents, knowing I was super into rock and metal, went out and bought me a DVD. It was John Petrucci's Rock Discipline. I think every guitarist that's around my age who was into metal has owned this DVD or seen it. I practiced the exercises in this DVD every day, like religiously. I would go through it, I would do one part one day, the next part the next day. And I think in a lot of ways, John Petrucci is indirectly responsible for me and probably millions of other kids playing guitar, and for learning to practice and learning to love it. I played this DVD so much as a kid that I can to this day remember the lick between the hand stretching exercises and the finger stretching exercises on the fretboard. And I love that lick. In fact, I should learn to play it. At the same time, I started dreaming about owning a Mesa Boogie amplifier. Probably because some of my favorite artists on some of my favorite albums use Mesas. They were using Mark IIs, the famous Mark II C pluses, dual rectifiers, even Road Kings. Now, I had always dreamed of owning a dual rectifier specifically when I was a kid. It was, to me, the most face-melting amp ever, and being a kid who was super into metal, that was like the pinnacle of amps, right? As I matured, I started to dream more about a Mark IV and then later a Mark V. And after spending a large amount of time annoying my girlfriend and the Sweetwater sales rep, I ended up going with JP2C. So maybe it's just that John Petrucci connection to my childhood or something that made me feel that way. Maybe I just didn't like the other amps, or maybe there's a million things that I can't even begin to understand that made me choose that. You can start to see that I definitely have a very emotional connection to my gear. And I don't think I'm the only one who feels that way, or the only one who makes a lot of decisions about gear, or the way they feel about gear, especially practicing and things like that, on emotion. As a counterpoint, I am a gigantic fan of Steve Wilson and Opeth. In fact, I would say a much larger fan of Steve Wilson and Opeth than I am of John Petrucci, although John Petrucci is an amazing guitarist and someone we all can learn from. In fact, most of us have. And while I'm a huge fan of those two people, I hate Paul Reed Smith guitars. I've owned several. I do not like them. Why? I don't know. They should be a dream guitar for me. They're ideal for multi-genre production. But maybe that's why I dislike them so much. They just seem like this jack of all trades, master of none sort of thing where, yeah, they can kind of do everything. They can play metal or folk or anything in between the two, or both at the same time. But to me, they don't have a personality, an identity. I don't really know what the word for it is. Maybe I'm just too particular. I don't know. Maybe I'm just jaded against them for some reason I can't nail down. Maybe I didn't practice enough when I owned them. Or maybe I just wasn't in the best emotional space and attached a negative connotation to them. Whatever the case may be, that's how I feel. And every one I've owned, I've sold within months. However, the minute I picked up the Majesty and plugged it in, I felt something. Even though I hated the pickup selector placement, mostly because I'm a bad player and I anchor my pinky finger when I'm doing leads. And then I felt something again when I plugged that guitar into the JP2C. I knew I was in love with both of those pieces of gear, and I knew that owning them and using them would inspire me to practice, would inspire my playing to be better, and inspire me to write better. I'm a 35-year-old man, and I cannot wait to get home some days to pick up that guitar. So with all that aside, maybe that's the issue. And maybe that was the problem all along, at least for me. I was spending all this time trying to find gear that checked boxes like versatile, or for metal, or for this or that, instead of trying to find maybe the piece of gear that made me feel inspired, made me feel cool, made me want to practice and play it. Maybe that was more important all along than checking boxes. Oh, okay, I think I get it now. Wait, does gear matter or not? Yeah, it does. It matters because it matters to us as human beings who have had experiences and challenges that we've overcome and challenges that we've failed and emotional developments that we've attached to things. What we're asking when we ask, does gear matter, is we're asking, does expensive gear matter? Does this one thing I'm obsessing over matter? Or how can I justify buying more shit to fill all these voids in my life? For me, I can say that my gear acquisition syndrome ended the minute I brought home and unboxed that Majesty and that JP2C. Will it come back? Yeah, probably. But I want to be clear. I also felt this way about a $400 guitar with $300 worth of work in it that I had for 2 decades. And for half of that time it was broken. Maybe instead of asking ourselves, does gear matter? Or asking a bunch of talking heads on the internet, does gear matter? Maybe we should be asking ourselves, what gear allows me to do the things that I want to do and feel inspired doing them? To continue practicing, to continue playing, to continue writing, or maybe writing differently. When we're chasing that dragon of the next thing and the next best item, are we really just trying to chase that emotional connection? How many guitars have I bought trying to feel like I did the first time I played Harvest by Opeth on that Jackson DK, or the first time I ever played a song on stage with that very same Jackson? I'd say probably more than I'm willing to admit here. So maybe take a look at these things, the things that you have, the things that you want, and ask yourself, why do I have them? Does this make me feel inspired? Does this make me want to play? Does this make me want to go after my art? Because no piece of gear is going to make you better, but a piece of gear can make you want to be better. I feel like these questions might be a lot more enlightening than just buying your next relic strat. The emotional connection we have as humans to buying things is well documented and it's inescapable. So instead of maybe trying to ignore it or not address it, maybe we should look at it from that angle and look at why we lust after gear, why we constantly buy things we don't need, that don't make us feel good, to fill holes we don't understand. Why do you think there's a million YouTube channels that are telling you right now what to buy and why to buy it? Maybe if we do that, we can buy the right shit the first time instead of the 5th time or the 7th time or the 10th time. Take it from me, a guy who's bought way too many things over way too long of a time just to try to get to where I am today. Well, hopefully this helped someone, anyone. Either way, thank you for watching.